You know, when we are asked to believe something truly monumental, there's this deeply wired universal human reflex.
Oh,
We
absolutely.
want a receipt. Like, we want tangible, undeniable proof. You tell me something incredible happened, and the immediate baseline response is always some variation of, well, pics or it didn't happen.
Yeah, it really is the bedrock of modern
Yeah.
skepticism.
Yeah.
We want the hard data. We want the physical evidence right in front of our eyes before we commit any mental or emotional energy to a claim.
Right, exactly. And it turns out that instinct isn't just a byproduct of the information age, it's actually ancient.
Very ancient.
So today we are opening up a really fascinating stack of material for this deep dive. We're pulling heavily from the July 2025 issue of a publication called Syro-Malabar Vision.
Which is a publication from the Syro-Malabar Major Archiepiscopal Curia.
Right, and we are pairing that with some historical context on Thomas the Apostle. And the mission of our deep dive today is to explore how an ancient religious institution balances mysterious supernatural miracles with, hard historical realities, modern mental health, and just profound human sacrifice in the 21st century.
It's such a unique mix. It creates this incredible intersection of theology, history, and human psychology that you really rarely get to view all in one place.
Yeah, it's wild. And it all starts with basically the ultimate skeptic,
Yeah.
because we all know the phrase doubting Thomas.
Right. Poor guy got branded for life.
Seriously, St. Thomas the Apostle is famous for basically being the guy in the upper room saying, I don't care what you all saw, unless I touch the wounds myself, I am just not buying it.
You wanted the receipt.
He did. Yet this same guy is the founding father of the Syro-Malabar Church in India, and he's venerated across the Eastern Orthodox churches, the Anglican Communion, and the Lutheran Church.
And, the irony is that his moment of doubt matters so much to the narrative of the church, specifically because of how it was resolved.
How so?
Well, when Jesus responds to Thomas, after actually letting him see the physical proof, by the way, he says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe."
Ah, right.
And that single sentence just became the foundational standard for faith over the next 2 millennia. It established an entirely new paradigm. Jesus was essentially removing the requirement of seeing or touching physical evidence as like the gold standard for belief.
And the church actually built an entire day around that specific paradigm shift, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
The July 3rd Feast of Jukrana, or Sapadhanam, it isn't just a memorial, it's practically a celebration of abandoning the need for physical proof.
Exactly. It commemorates Thomas's martyrdom and his ultimate unquestioning declaration of love when he finally sees the proof. When he says, "My Lord and my God." So it's a day for the Syro-Malabar Church to express gratitude and renew their mission, really anchoring themselves in a faith that supposedly doesn't require a receipt.
Which is a beautiful theological ideal. But human nature is messy.
Oh, extremely messy.
Because when you actually look at how this institution operates, we immediately hit a massive contradiction to that no physical proof needed rule.
We really do.
We move from Thomas needing to touch physical wounds straight into how the modern church handles claims of physical, supernatural evidence today. And let me tell you, things get very CSI, Vatican, very quickly.
Yeah, we are getting into Eucharistic miracles.
Right. But before we get to the bleeding bread, let's just establish the baseline theology here for you. We're talking about transubstantiation.
Yes, the core concept.
The idea that during the Holy Korbana, which is the Eucharistic liturgy, the bread and wine literally change substance to become the body and blood of Christ, even if they look and taste exactly the same.
And that invisible change requires the exact kind of blind faith Jesus was asking of Thomas.
Yep.
The theological mechanism is fascinating, actually. There is a specific Syriac liturgical term used here. It's called katabatic kudasha.
Katabatic kudasha. Okay, what does that mean?
It basically translates to a descending sanctification. It's the belief that the Holy Spirit comes down to transform the elements and the community.
Okay.
So the substance changes entirely, while the physical accidents, which is, the appearance, the texture, the taste, all of that, remains identical to regular bread and wine.
But occasionally, supposedly, that veil drops. The physical appearances actually change.
Right.
And there's a wild timeline of examples in the sources where this invisible transformation becomes visibly real.
Yeah, the earliest recorded one is from the 8th century in Lanciano, Italy.
Okay.
A Brazilian monk was celebrating the liturgy, and he was struggling with a profound crisis of faith, like a classic doubting Thomas moment.
Right, he wanted proof.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And during the consecration, the host literally transformed into human flesh. and the wine into actual blood.
Right in the middle of intense Christian persecution by the Byzantine Emperor Leo III, no less.
Which adds a lot of context, yeah.
Then we jump to the 13th century in Santarém, Portugal, and this one sounds like a medieval thriller.
It really does.
A woman wants to fix her marriage, so she visits a sorcerer. Naturally. And the sorcerer demands she bring him a consecrated host. So she takes one from the church, wraps it in a cloth, and gets home only to find the cloth is just soaked in blood. The host was bleeding.
And if you look closely at these accounts, a very specific pattern starts to emerge.
What's that?
These physical manifestations almost always happen in moments of human failure, doubt, or sacrilege.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the church views these miracles not as rewards for the deeply faithful, but as life preservers thrown to the doubting. They happen when someone's faith is fracturing.
Okay, that makes sense. And that dynamic carries right into the modern era, but now they bring actual lab equipment to the table, which is just fascinating.
Oh, the science is intense.
In August 1996 in Buenos Aires, a host is dropped. The standard protocol is to leave it in water to dissolve. But days later, it hasn't dissolved. It has turned into a fleshy, bloody substance.
And the scientific scrutiny applied to this specific event was really rigorous, largely because it was investigated under the leadership of Archbishop Jorge Bergoglio.
Who becomes Pope Francis.
Exactly, the future Pope Francis.
So they bring in a pathologist, Dr. Frederick, who examines it blind. He isn't told where the sample came from at all.
Which is crucial for objectivity.
Right. And he concludes this isn't just generic human tissue, it's myocardium, left ventricular heart tissue.
The muscle that pumps blood to the rest of the body.
Yeah. And he notes it shows signs of extreme trauma, as if the person had been beaten severely around the chest. Plus, it has an AB blood type, which matches the blood found on the Shroud of Turin.
Highly specific medical data applied to a religious relic, and it really sets the stage for how these events are handled today.
Which brings us to a much more recent event. The Villa Kannur miracle in Kerala, November 13th, 2013. The face of Jesus supposedly appears on a host during the epiclesis prayer.
And they don't just put it in a display case for people to venerate immediately.
No. They lock it away in absolute secrecy for years. And they send it to Christ University in Bangalore for intense scientific testing.
Yeah, the Vatican's dicastery for the doctrine of the faith specifically ordered tests like FTIR analysis. That's Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy.
Wow.
They also used high-performance liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry.
They ran mass spectrometry on a communion wafer. Let's break down why they would go to those lengths for you guys.
Yeah.
Mass spec is a technique that measures the mass-to-charge ratio of ions. It literally breaks a sample down to its absolute molecular weight.
Exactly. They use mass spectrometry to prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that no red dyes, animal blood, or external chemicals were painted onto the wafer. They are looking for the absolute molecular signature. And the scientists concluded the image was formed from the material of the host itself, with zero external manipulation.
Incredible.
So based on that exhaustive data, the Vatican officially recognized it in March 2025, and it was publicly proclaimed in May 2025.
Okay, but I have to push back here.
Go for it.
If the absolute core tenet of the religion is Jesus telling Thomas, "Blessed are those who believe without seeing," doesn't parading scientific proof of bleeding bread and running mass spectrometry to prove a molecular signature completely contradict the very nature of blind faith?
It's a fair question.
I mean, aren't they just giving the modern skeptic exactly what they want, the receipt?
That is the profound tension the church is constantly managing. But the defense is nuanced.
Okay, lay it on me.
The church strictly classifies these events as private revelations. They are not public revelation.
What's the difference?
That means you are not required to believe in the Villa Kannur miracle or the Lanciano miracle to be a member in good standing. It is literally not essential for salvation.
So they're like optional bonuses.
Yeah, they are optional aids. The theological experts warn heavily against overemphasizing them. Their purpose is not to definitively prove God exists in a laboratory setting, because a forced belief isn't faith.
Right. If you can prove it with math, it's not faith anymore.
Exactly. The idea is that God permits these anomalies to help limited human minds grasp a mystery that is supposed to be happening invisibly every single day. The ultimate goal of a Eucharistic miracle is to point believers back to the daily, unmiraculous-looking liturgy, not to replace it with a pursuit of scientific anomalies.
Okay, I get that. So if Eucharistic miracles provide a mysterious, supernatural proof for some, there is also the demand for historical
Oh,
proofs.
absolutely.
Like, if I'm a historian looking at this institution, I want to know, did Thomas the Apostle actually go to India? What is the documentary evidence behind the tradition?
And those historical roots are the bedrock for the Syro-Malabar Church's entire identity today. The documentary evidence points us to the writings of Origen of Alexandria from the early 3rd century, roughly around AD 224.
That is incredibly early, considering we are talking about events in the 1st century.
It is. Now, Origen's original work is lost, but the critical passages were preserved by a later, highly influential historian named Eusebius.
Right.
In his commentary on Genesis, Origen writes that when the apostles cast lots to divide the known world for preaching, Thomas was assigned a region called Parthia.
Okay, but Parthia isn't modern-day India, though.
Well, in the geopolitical landscape of the ancient world, it practically was.
Really?
Yeah, the Parthian Empire was vast. At its height, it extended all the way across modern-day Iran, deep into the Indus River Valley, and encompassed northwest India. So the earliest written patristic texts we have actually corroborate the oral traditions of the Indian Church. Thomas went east.
Okay, that makes sense. And those ancient Eastern roots give the Syro-Malabar Church a very unique, highly protected identity today.
Very much so.
There is some heavy canon law terminology used in the sources to explain how the modern church is structured. They describe it as a sui iuris church with its own right.
Yes, sui iuris.
Let's try to map this to something secular to understand the mechanics. It sounds almost like being a wholly owned subsidiary of a massive global corporation like the Vatican, where you have your own autonomous CEO and board of directors, while the right is basically your specific brand culture and internal language.
You know, the corporate analogy holds up surprisingly well for the governance structure.
Awesome.
The Latin term sui iuris literally means of its own right. The Syro-Malabar Church is one of 24 such churches within the global Catholic communion.
I had no idea there were 24.
Yeah, there's quite a few. And it is legally autonomous. It has its own governance structure, its own synod, and its own major archbishop. But it operates in full, unbroken communion with the Pope in Rome.
And the right is the culture.
Exactly. The rite is the entire liturgical, theological, and spiritual heritage. For the Syro-Malabar Church, that rite is deeply shaped by Indian history. It's integrated with Hindu cultural elements and anchored in Eastern Syriac traditions. It is distinctly not Latin or Western.
And it sounds like the top management in Rome is fiercely protective of that autonomy.
They are.
The late Pope Francis, who passed away in April 2025, championed this Eastern jurisdiction. And his successor, the newly elected Pope Leo XIV, made it a point in May 2025 to tell the Eastern churches to aggressively preserve their distinctiveness.
Yes.
He called them a light from the East, insisting they shouldn't blend in and become westernized, but rather maintain the ancient traditions given to them by Thomas.
But, maintaining that distinct identity has never been a peaceful academic exercise.
No.
Defending an ancient identity over 2 millennia requires a staggering amount of sacrifice. It has often required blood.
And this brings us to a really stark reality. We move from theological debates and ancient geography to the incredible and sometimes just terrifying sacrifices believers have made to protect this faith.
Yeah.
We see 2 examples in the text that span centuries but share the exact same DNA. First, the ancient story of Mar Afrahat in the 4th century.
A fascinating figure.
He was a Persian monk born to non-Christian parents who converted during the brutal systemic religious persecutions of King Shapar II.
And he was part of an intense ascetic community called the Sons of the Covenant. Living under immense pressure, knowing his life was constantly at risk, he wrote 23 exhortations, known as the Demonstrations.
And he did it in a really clever way, right?
Yeah, he used the 22 letters of the Syriac alphabet as an intricate acrostic structure to guide, encourage, and fortify his fellow believers who were facing execution.
It's just a beautiful testament to ancient resilience. But defending that identity isn't just a historical problem. It brings us to a staggering modern reality in Lahore, Pakistan, the story of Akash Bashir.
This is one of the most sobering narratives of modern sacrifice you will ever encounter.
It really is. March 15th, 2015, Lahore, Pakistan. Akash is a 20-year-old guy working volunteer security at St. John's Church. It's a Sunday, and the church is packed with 1,700 people attending the service.
It's a normal Sunday.
Right. He's checking people at the main gate, spots a guy who looks suspicious and realizes the man is wearing a suicide vest.
Just terrifying.
The bomber tries to force his way in.
And Akash's response defies every instinct of self-preservation. He physically grabs the bomber and wrestles him, shouting, "I would rather die than allow evil to enter."
And then the vest detonates. The bomber is killed, and Akash is killed instantly. But the 1,700 people inside the church are saved.
Unbelievable.
In 2022, Pope Francis declared him a servant of God, which is the first step towards sainthood. But I just want to pause and really think about the psychology here for a second.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
He was 20 years old. Most 20-year-olds are stressing about final exams, navigating relationships, or trying to figure out their career path. What possesses a young man in an impoverished, highly volatile region to volunteer to stand at a gate knowing he might literally have to absorb a bomb?
It forces a complete redefinition of what commitment looks like, honestly.
Yeah.
If we look back to the start of this discussion, we talked about Thomas the Apostle.
Right.
Thomas didn't just go to India, deliver some philosophical lectures, and retire. He was martyred. He was killed for what he brought with him. Akash Bashir is the modern, visceral echo of that exact same dedication.
That's a powerful connection.
The concept of a missionary is often misunderstood, I think. It isn't just about traveling to preach or do charity work, though, there are groups like the Utkala Mission in Odisha or the Snehagiri Missionary Sisters who do incredible, vital social work.
Sure.
But at its core, being a missionary is a radical, sometimes fatal, commitment to protecting the community and the faith.
Yeah.
Akash embodied the absolute ultimate form of that love.
And while heroes like Akash Bashir face sudden, explosive physical violence, the everyday believer is often fighting a very silent internal battle.
Very true.
The materials make an utterly fascinating pivot here from ancient theology and martyrdom straight into human psychology. Right in the middle of a religious text is a highly clinical, thoroughly modern article on generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD.
It is such a remarkable inclusion. It reads like an excerpt from a medical journal.
It really does. It notes that GAD affects over 3% of the population, often kicking in around age 20, which, by the way, is the exact same age Akash was.
Wow, yeah.
It lists crippling physical symptoms like sleep disturbances, muscle tension, and irritable bowel syndrome. And it doesn't just offer spiritual platitudes or tell people to pray it away.
Right, none of that.
It details practical, evidence-based treatments, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, mindfulness-based stress reduction, proper sleep hygiene, and psychiatric medication.
It creates a fascinating juxtaposition regarding how the church views the human body and mind today.
How so?
Well, on one hand, you have the acknowledgement of an incredibly fragile, chemically imbalanced brain that might need SSRIs and CBT just to get through a normal Tuesday without a panic attack.
And on the other hand, in the very same material, there is a deep theological exploration of the resurrection of the body. The creed promises that this anxious, fragile body is going to be transformed into a glorified body.
Yes, and the theology lists 5 specific traits for this future glorified body.
Let's hear them.
It will have incorruptibility, meaning it is eternal and cannot decay. It will possess glory, radiating light, subtlety, which is the ability to move through physical barriers, much like Jesus walking through a locked door to meet Thomas.
Oh, full circle. Nice. Yeah.
Then there's agility, meaning no physical heaviness or fatigue, and speed, no longer bound by the constraints of earthly time or space.
Okay, so it's almost like they view the current human body as a beta version operating on highly limited hardware.
That's a great analogy.
Like it gets anxious, it breaks down, it needs therapy and medication. But the glorified body is the final uncorrupted hardware update where the physical limitations of space and time are permanently removed.
Exactly.
But the tension is wild. You have this promise of a subtle, incorruptible future body where you can walk through walls. But right now, you're being told to go to therapy and get your sleep schedule right because paying rent and existing in the world is incredibly stressful.
But that duality is the entire point. It isn't a contradiction, it's a synthesis. Yeah. The theological framework explicitly states that eternal life isn't just some far-off sci-fi concept that only happens after you die. The church teaches that eternal life begins at baptism. It starts in the present moment.
Ah, so the ultimate hardware update and the anxious beta tests are happening concurrently.
Bingo. Because eternal life has already begun. Caring for the current fragile human mind, treating your generalized anxiety disorder with real science, therapy, and medicine is just as vital and holy as preparing your soul for eternity.
That is actually really profound.
You are not supposed to ignore or neglect the physical reality of the present while waiting for the supernatural reality of the future. The physical body matters deeply.
Man. When you step back and look at all this ground we've covered today, it is a staggering picture of the human experience.
It really is.
We started with St. Thomas the Apostle standing in a room, demanding to touch a physical wound before he would commit his life to a cause. We looked at how that desire for undeniable proof led to 8th century bleeding hosts and 21st century Vatican scientists running mass spectrometry on communion wafers to verify molecular signatures and AB blood types.
And we traced the historical footprint back to 3rd century manuscripts by Origen, confirming ancient geographic routes through the Parthian Empire, and looked at how modern popes are fiercely protecting the legal and cultural autonomy of those ancient Eastern rites today.
And we saw the extreme end of human endurance. From the quiet clinical battle against generalized anxiety, treating the beta version of our human hardware, to the deafening roar of a 20-year-old kid named Akash Bashir, wrapping his arms around a suicide bomber to save 1,700 people he barely knew.
Yeah.
So whether you approach this as a hardcore skeptic, a historian, or a devoted believer, this exploration proves that the human quest for meaning is messy, it's deeply complex, and sometimes it is incredibly brave.
It is. And, throughout this exploration, we've looked at the intense lengths this institution goes to in order to find proof, whether through Eucharistic miracles analyzed in a modern lab or ancient texts painstakingly preserved by historians like Eusebius.
Right, always looking for the receipt.
Exactly. But when you look at the ultimate sacrifice of someone like Akash Bashir, I think it demands a different question.
What's that?
What if the most compelling proof of a belief system isn't found in a laboratory analyzing the molecular structure of a 13th century relic? What if the ultimate proof is simply what that belief system inspires ordinary human beings to do for each other in the present day?